Alright guys, how you doing? It's Will, just in time prepping, and today is story time with Will. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start on chapter 11. It's called Dangerous Secrets, and it's February 10th. But before we start, if you guys haven't been watching the story, go back in the playlist and look under story time and catch up to now, because the story started out a little slow, but it's starting to pick up pretty good, and it is getting interesting. So here we go, okay? It's book 1 of chapter 11. It says, Angie! Mark snapped out of the nightmare abruptly. He focused on steamed-up windows and felt sweat rolling down his neck and spine in a small torrent. He flipped off the heat and shut his eyes again. He could still see Angie's long, brittle hair had flared in the dust. How the blood-smeared footprints dragged out behind her as she walked with the broken landscape, searching for her son while radiation victims from his bus escape, the walking dead, followed on her heels. Was it only a dream, or perhaps a vision? A warning? No way to know for sure, but it made him uneasy. Radiation victims from his bus escaped the walking dead. Mark snapped his seatbelt on over his long black coat, telling himself it didn't matter. Wherever she was, she would be fine. He glanced over his shoulder and grinned at the animal curled up on the neatly packed rear seat. How's it hanging, dog? The big timber wolf ducked his snout under a wide paw and groaned. Mark grunted agreement, wishing the sun would hurry up and rise so he could make better time, and also because he was sick of the damp, cold air that always hinted of snow. Not yet. No snow until he found her. I hear you, dog. A few more days and we'll take a break. Get some hot food and extra sleep. As if he understood, and Mark wasn't sure he didn't, the blackish red and gray animal rolled over and stared at his master upside down with piercing golden eyes full of patience. Mark yawned again and wanting to shave and shower, but he swallowed a pill instead, needing to be alert to drive. He was exhausted. He had made 250 miles in 11 days, with over half of it in just over the last 5. He'd even been eating while he traveled and only pulled over when he couldn't stay awake any longer. Mark had calculated that Angie was roughly 100 miles ahead of him, and he had pushed hard to get here. As a result, he wasn't completely sure where in southwest Ohio he had stopped. The roads here were unbelievable, and intersections required hours to get through in some places. It had taken him a full day to get across the suspension bridge from Kentucky. Would have been faster if he'd left his vehicle behind, but Mark wouldn't do that without having another lined up. He rolled down the window to view the foggy street sign. The first thing he noticed was a billboard above him wishing the city of Cincinnati a happy, prosperous new year. Some great joke, he muttered, seeing a muddy, rusting CSX rail yard under inches of sludge. The dark trestles were barely visible through the fog, and even the graffiti he could see. Die Milton Hundo Eats Draft Balls, PX 2012, looked like it had been there for years instead of 8 weeks. Nothing moved on the dirty suspension bridge, swaying precariously behind him, just the same wind and rain-blown debris that was everywhere. Ahead were the burned frames of 2 Humvees with charmed Wright-Patterson logo on the sides. Both had crashed into the stand of dead and dying pines. It was bad here, maybe contaminated, and Mark was glad Angie had left. Even as he worried about her being alone, clearly it had become too dangerous to stay. Sighing, Mark consulted the map. Where was he? His heart leapt as his finger as he figured out his location. Close, very close to the place where Angie had left ghosts of her life. A short 10 minutes later, Mark rolled up Queen City Hill, seen but not worried about their cleared lanes. It had probably happened in the first weeks of the war when some cities had actually tried to return to normal, then the power had gone off. Marc wondered again why he was here. Angie had a man. Why wasn't he helping her get her son back? Had her husband run out on her? Maybe he'd been taken to the draft along with the boy. That made sense. Maybe he's dead. Marc's heart whispered the alternative eagerly. Marc shoved the thought away with revulsion as he braked gently in front of the brick apartment building he had been here a decade ago, but hadn't possessed the courage or the callousness to knock. She had a completely new life by then and had realized that it didn't include him. He had no right to disrupt her happiness. Marc had returned to duty and thrown himself into his career. By saving, fixing, and impressing, he'd eventually ended up in Marsoc, where they had used his brains as well as his brawn, but he had never married, was unable to make himself settle down for a female. He'd never regretted loving Angie, only that he had let them be caught before they could run. She's not here now, place is empty, Marc muttered, not sure why he had come. Chasing ghosts was always a bad idea, but here he was drawn into the past again, his will. He had spent his adult life trying to convince himself that it hadn't meant much, that he hadn't been the one, and Marc was filled with sudden, familiar shame. He'd taken advantage of her and known it. He owed her a debt, and there was a little that she could ask for that he wouldn't give. After all, she was family. I want to know what type of life she had, Marc thought. That's why I came, reckon. I don't want to face her in the dark. He left the engine running and dog watching anxiously. He didn't lock the door, though the remote entry was in his pocket. Anyone who tried to enter the Blazer would get a big surprise. Marc jogged through the drizzle to the front of the building, only vaguely noticing the burnt shape of a truck that was more recent and on an oak tree that had obviously been hit by something harsh. His mind dismissed it as yet another battle sense. Opening the cracked door, Marc slid his coat behind his gun handle, even without thinking about it. The hallway was dark and smelled like burnt sugar. 2 sheets of paper on the carpeted floor caught his attention, and Marc knew instinctively who had written them. I'll settle for whatever is in those pages, he decided, snapping on his penlight and picking them up from the mud-tracked carpet. He didn't really want to go inside the home that another man had shared with, Angie, where some lucky bastard had lived the life Marc had dreamed about every night since being ripped from her side. Marc read the letters with sharp-edged curiosity that missed little. Charlie, lock yourself inside and be quiet as you can, and do it right now. If you're reading this, either we missed each other or we didn't survive the trip. I'm terrified of that, of leaving you on your own. I wish I could be with you. I love you and I miss you so much. It feels like there's a knife in my gut. I have a big secret to tell you, one that was supposed to wait until you were grown and out of the house. Kenny is not your dad. I know you've suspected, but I couldn't tell you before, and I'm sure you understand why. Your dad is Marcus Charles Brady. Our family was Bible strict Christians, and when your dad and I fell for each other, only cousins by marriage, it was too close for people to accept. We hid it for a long time, but feelings like that can't be fought. We didn't plan on it, and we were swept away. We had decided to leave when I was older, but fate didn't give us time. A bit after your dad was sent away, I realized you were coming, and I wanted you more than anything. I didn't tell anyone, just ran as fast as I could. They had legal control until I was of age, and since I was only 16, they could have taken you. Worse, I always believed they had made me get an abortion. I ran and Kenny found me. How it happened is my own personal hell. You already feel too much of my pain, and I won't share that. Kenny and I made a deal that said you and I would become his obedient family. It seemed like the best I could do at the time. I know that it was the wrong choice. How could I not know when I feel it and look at you? He has been our master. Yet, after all that's happened, he has chosen not to come back. That only leaves one person you can trust, your real dad. You have to call Mark, and you know what I mean by that. He'll come once he knows it's true. I'm so sorry that I never told Mark, never gave him the chance to be your father. He had no idea you existed or would have come for us. I know it in my... There was more, but Mark let it go. And anger, guilt, and joy warmed his heart. They had a son. They made a baby. She shouldn't have told him. He wouldn't have come back a happy man, really. His heart was cruel. You wouldn't have felt like a trapped criminal, sure that it was wrong. Mark let out a harsh sound. That's exactly how it would have felt then, but it didn't matter. He had knocked and she'd been forced to survive on her own. I should have talked to you on that day, Mark said out loud. Yes, another voice answered with a deep satisfaction. You should have. Understandingly, instantly, that this man had been all along waiting for their son, Mark, spun as he drew. You must be the sinner she talks about in the letter. Her lover, Warren sneered, pain lacing his words. Mark took in the charred skin and furious face and instantly connected him to the wrecks outside. You're why she couldn't wait for me. Mark was suddenly sure this man had forced Angie to defend herself, and the rage was nearly overwhelming. Warren scowled at the confirmation of the relationship, raising his own gun as he moved out of the dark corner where he'd been lurking. My daughter and my leadership are long gone because of your witch. Will she come back for you? Mark's face darkened. She's not who you should worry about. They moved at the same time, but only one shot lit the darkness in the colt as the colt barked loudly in the flash of justice and death. Warren's weapon dropped to the carpet floor, blood blooming out of his chest, and a second later the broken preacher dropped to his knees, expression almost relieved as scarlet ran in a small stream from a corner of his mouth. Mark stared down at the shuddering man for whom death was fast approaching. When Warren's mouth opened, but no sound came out, Mark understood anyway. She's not here to serve any man. She's special. A demon? Warren choked out. Mark's sympathy vanished, and he watched the man take his last breath while either thunder of a gunfire cracked violently in the distance. Look at yourself. You have no right to judge. And that is book 1, you guys. I'm going to stop there so I don't go over on my time. We're going to start book 2 next week. It'll be chapter 11, book 2. As you can see, it's getting pretty darn good, huh? So I want you guys to remember, hey, this is a good book. I want you to go back in the library and find it in my playlist. Watch it all the way through and start keeping up. It's going to be a good book. We are, let me see, it looks like we are 20% into the story, so it's going to be a good one, you guys. I want to thank you guys for watching, okay? I really appreciate it. Remember, we have coffee time tomorrow with Will, so that starts at 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Until then, I want you guys to know I love each and every one of you. I really love the support that you give me, and it's God bless you, God bless me, and God bless US of A. Thanks for watching, you guys.